and so that's what I'm working on. A couple thoughts on Gary Hunt. No, I still don't trust him, even though he's been arrested yesterday. I have a lot of information about Gary that I won't or can't post because the federal government decided that it's a crime to expose their informants. And the nature of the information that I gathered has to do with how I protect myself, which is I record everything. I started doing it about 5 years ago because of how I got burned so badly when I was an early adapter, promoter of Bitcoin. And so because the government sent in, the FBI, I don't know, CIA, sent in fake programmers to disrupt my business, create false accusations, threats of lawsuits, so forth and so on. And I said, that's not what happened. That's not what was said. I decided that I was going to capture all of these things, record all phone calls, and I still do to this day. I didn't know that material that I captured when I was at the Refuge in Oregon and people that I had conversations with on the phone would be so important. Some of it I didn't archive. Most I did, simply because that's my habit. And with these operatives and informants, it's difficult to know that a conversation you had or something they said, that the pieces that would identify them as informants wouldn't become available until 6 or 8 months later. And then you have lost that other evidence that you could have used to expose them, or at least slow them down from their destructive ways. So with Gary Hunt, I still have most of it. And I'm also, I want to tell you guys, I don't believe for a moment that this arrest is legitimate. I think they're trying to rehabilitate him. They have 25 years, that is, i.e. the FBI and the CIA and the Forestry Service and the B.L.M. and whatever other agencies that he has, I can't say work for, as in for money or compensation, because I haven't come to the full conclusion that Gary even knows fully that he is the destruction on people's lives and on the Patriot movement, the destruction that he brings. Nevertheless, I don't think people should be trusting him, and I think that it's a lot like Greg Burleson, who was discovered after years of being an informant and operative that he was a fake defendant. And I knew already that they do in fact create fake defendants, and they put them in the jails and the prisons, and they inform on innocent people. They entrap continuously people that are criminals, that are rewarded with early outs, given perverse incentives to do this thing. Well, what better way to restore Gary Hunt than to have him get arrested? The idea that he was being, subpoenaed or summoned by Judge Anna Brown to stop outing the operatives, which was all public information anyways, was, I think, an attempt to rehabilitate him. It was losing traction. And so I think this is the next move to get people to trust him again. And I noticed that all of the people that are against Gavin and Kelly strongly jumped to his support and said, oh, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be in Oregon. I was going to be in Nevada, but they say now they're going to go to Oregon and support Gary. Freedom of the press. Well, I'm sorry. One of the conversations that was recorded, that when I think Gary believed that I was an informant when I went to the Refuge, and I do believe that, and I think the FBI thought that I was an informant also. They just didn't know who I was working for a while. But that Gary trusted me, and he talks a lot. And other than being an intellectual bully, when you start putting together the bits and pieces of long conversations, you see a pattern, you hear names. Gary trashed Odalis Sharp and her children when I brought to his attention what the Child Protective Services in Kansas was doing. He mouthed exactly what the press, the worst accusations that were completely false, he mouthed it back, and had no sympathy for anybody who is involved with Child Protective Services. The one thing that patriots with children fear the most. Gary trashed Gavin Syme, and this was 8 months ago, called him a media whore. Gary trashed Pete Santelli multiple times, had no, said he's not a journalist, and basically mouthed the same thing that the FBI and the government was saying, was that he was part of the whole, intent to whatever, prevent the government from doing their job, federal workers and so forth, and provoking and encouraging people to come, and that he wasn't a journalist, and that Gary had higher standards. Well, that's when I kind of drew the line. I said, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm grateful that he helped me get my scanners back. But when I started analyzing what happened after Terry Linnell outed herself, and I think actually she didn't out herself, she was paid to go up there and testify in lieu of my testimony, because her testimony, at least in the first trial, mirrored my affidavit and the people that I was hoping to testify for, and was put on standby for that purpose. I did testify in the second trial, but then they pulled out this Fish fellow. His name was Fish at the Refuge, Fish something, to again suppress testimony that I would have given, but the whole thing was scripted. Look, guys, I know I'm going real fast on this, but don't trust anybody that is a strong supporter of Gary's and has been writing in his forums. Just be real careful. Feel good? No, don't trust them. There are other people in that environment where they just don't know better, and so, but I do, and I can't reveal the recordings, but as time goes by, I will talk more specifically and quote from them the things that Gary said, and I'll share with you guys the names that are connected with him that I believe are government-paid informants, or at least loyalists and sympathizers, or people that just think like he does. Keep in mind that Gary, with regard to Gavin and Kelly, who, by the way, I want to say, give a shout out to Gavin and Kelly, that I support crane flies, having an epidemic of crane flies this year. I support Gavin and Kelly 100%. You guys, I can see that you're fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ, and so we share values in that respect. Gary doesn't share your values. He's not a Christian. He's somewhat of a vulgar man. Smokes like a chimney, and just grew up in a completely different world. And so there's a conflict of spirit going on there that the Bible talks about. Not necessarily a conflict of the overall goal of liberty. And I think a lot of the people that are against or don't like Gavin and Kelly, that's really what's going on. They don't even know themselves fully. They can't articulate when I ask them, well, what is it that you have against Kelly? What is it that you have against Gavin? Well, they just, and they can't say it. They can't articulate it. So you guys, Gavin and Kelly, you have my unequivocal support, and my family loves you. My kids love you. But I don't believe that this situation with Gary is real. Now, it is not unheard of also, by the way, that the government would throw one of their own under the bus. So if it turns out that Gary is genuinely punished and held in bad conditions, and then it behooves Gary then to expose himself and what he knows if there's something going on behind the scenes. But it's not unusual that, it could be that the government, one hand is not talking to the other, right? And that maybe if Gary has actual handlers, if he is an actual agent or informant, which I don't know, I'm leaning in that direction, as opposed to his activities being inadvertent or passive, then they'll contact the courts and work that out, right? Which, there's a lot of things that happened and conversations that I heard that you put together over the course of a year, and you start to see a pattern of behavior in people that you just realize these are not truth tellers. And that was one of the reasons why I supported Ammon Bundy when I saw him on the news. I said to my wife, this is a truth teller. And Lavoy Finicum, this is a truth teller. I didn't know about the rest, but I knew about this. And then I researched what happened at the Bundy Ranch, which I had never even heard of. So that's about all I have to say on that, which is I record everything. I started doing it about 5 years ago because of how I got burned so badly when I was an early adapter promoter of Bitcoin, and so won't or can't post because the federal government decided that it's a crime to expose their informants, and the nature of the information that I gathered has to do with how I protect myself, and so that's what I'm working on. A couple thoughts on Gary Hunt. No, I still don't trust him, even though he's been arrested yesterday. I have a lot of information about Gary that because the government sent in, the FBI, I don't know, CIA, sent in fake programmers to disrupt my business, create false accusations, threats of lawsuits, so forth and so on. And I said, that's not what happened, that's not what was said. I decided that I was going to capture all of these things, record all phone calls, and I still do to this day. I didn't know that material that I captured when I was at the Refuge in Oregon